Yes, this evening is based on, as you know, Baha'u'llah's letter to Queen Victoria. And while he doesn't speak about climate change, not unsurprisingly, there's quite a lot in that letter which could be considered relevant to the situation of governments and people. Yeah, I thought I'd just very briefly give a little bit of an introduction to the situation of Baha'u'llah at the time that he wrote to Queen Victoria. For anybody who doesn't know too much, which I think is not most of you, perhaps if I could start by making a comparison that when we all know that when Jesus, before he told people who he was, in a sense, that he apparently went to John the Baptist, who was preparing the way for Jesus's coming, and insisted that John the Baptist should baptize him, which was like a sort of public statement of his being a follower of John the Baptist. And then later, quite soon later, became the one that John the Baptist had been preparing people for. And a somewhat similar thing happened with the Baha'u'llah, that in Iran, he was a wealthy noble with all sorts of important connections in society. The Bab came to prepare for the coming of the promised one, who we know now was Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah became a follower of the Bab. And then from being a nobleman, a wealthy nobleman with properties and so on, because of his association with the Bab's teachings, he was arrested and all his properties and belongings were confiscated and pillaged. And he was put in a prison in Tehran, an underground prison, and then released eventually, but on condition that he went into exile. And so he went into exile to Baghdad. And since we're going to be referring to connections with the British government and the Queen, it's interesting, the first connection that I found a trace of was when he was in Baghdad towards the end of his time there, when it was there were demands from the Sultan that he should leave Baghdad and go to Constantinople, which is Istanbul today. The representative of the British government, who was the consul general, was a man called Colonel Sir Arnold Burroughs Kemble. He entered into friendly correspondence with Baha'u'llah, and he offered him the protection of British citizenship. And following that, he called on him in person and undertook to transfer to Queen Victoria any communication he might wish to forward to her. He also expressed readiness to arrange for the transfer of Baha'u'llah's residence to India or any place that was agreeable to him, all of which is rather fascinating. And Baha'u'llah was very grateful, but he declined these kind offers. And as far as I know, Colonel Kemble was not involved with the transfer of the letter to Queen Victoria that came later. So that was probably 1862 or around there, just before his he left Baghdad. And before he left Baghdad, he declared himself to be the one that the Bab had promised. But he only declared it to a select group of followers. So it wasn't a public announcement. The public announcement came some years later when he was in Turkey. In fact, he only stayed a few months in Constantinople, and then the Sultan and the authorities banished him. Gave him his third banishment to the northwest of Turkey on the European side, Adrianople, which is now called Edirne. And it was from there, before he went on his fourth exile, which was to Acre in Palestine, it was from there that Baha'u'llah started his letters to the leaders in the world, the main leaders, kings and queens and religious leaders. So that's the background to it. So if we go now, just a slight moment, pause while I share the screen. And there, I think we've got it. And right, can everybody see a blank screen?
Yes.
Good, good. Right. So Queen Victoria, here she is. And Baha'u'llah wrote this letter after he arrived in Acre, in the prison in Acre. He wrote this letter to Queen Victoria. Right, so that's the subject. And this is where he wrote the letter from. He wrote it while he was in the prison in Acre. And I think his cell was up here somewhere. So this was a prisoner in the sort of penal fortress of which served the whole of the Ottoman Empire, writing to the Queen of England, who was also Queen of the British Empire spread throughout the world. And we're going to hear the introductory thing. We're not going to have all the letter, but we'll have what I think are significant extracts from it. But the introduction, if you think of this prisoner writing to the Queen, this first paragraph is really rather interesting. Carolyn, can you read this, please?
O Queen in London, incline thine ear unto the voice of thy Lord, the Lord of all mankind. Cast away all that is on earth, and attire the head of thy kingdom with the crown of the remembrance of thy Lord, the all-glorious. He in truth hath come unto the world in his most great glory, and all that hath been mentioned in the gospel has been fulfilled.
So, remembering that the Queen of England was also the head of the Church of England, this is a clear announcement of his fulfillment of the prophecies of the Gospels.
Lay aside thy desire and set thine heart towards thy Lord, the Ancient of Days. We make mention of thee for the sake of God, and desire that thy name may be exalted through thy remembrance of God, the Creator of earth and heaven.
Now, sorry, yes, I just go back before we have that. So it's very difficult for us to imagine what this must have felt for her. I don't know what sort of translation she had of his letter, because obviously it wasn't written in English. It was written, I suppose, in, does anybody know if it was Farsi or Arabic? No, I'm not sure.
Arabic.
Arabic, was it?
I
Right.
think it was Arabic, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Pretty sure.
Right. Well, undoubtedly, in the government of the time, they were quite used to translating things from Arabic into English. But how good that translation was, we don't know. Anyway, he then proceeds to congratulate her about certain things. Now, this is interesting because in his letters to the other kings and rulers, there wasn't a great deal of congratulations going on. But he congratulates her for a couple of things. And here's the first one.
Slavery. We've been informed that thou hast forbidden the trading in slaves, both men and women. This verily is what God hath enjoined in this wondrous revelation. God hath truly destined a reward for thee because of this. He verily will pay the doer of good his due recompense, wert thou to follow what has been sent unto thee by him who is the all-knowing, the all-informed.
Right, so this may seem a little bit sort of past history. It is interesting nonetheless. But I just thought that actually it might be worth mentioning that when Abdul-Baha, who was the son and successor of Baha'u'llah, leader of the Baha'i community after Baha'u'llah passed on, when he was released from prison and exile just before the First World War and was able to travel and went to America, he said something very interesting in relation to slavery, because of course America was very much involved in the slave trade, as was the UK. He, in one of his talks, he said, between 1860 and 1865, you did a wonderful thing. That's speaking to the American government. You abolished chattel slavery. But today, you must do a much more wonderful thing. You must abolish industrial slavery. And I think that makes it very interesting that slavery isn't just owning people, but it's requiring them to work for a pittance and not being really free. And that's still goes on to a surprising degree in the world today. And of course, it was the time of the Industrial Revolution. So in a way, it's quite sort of relevant. Now, the next thing is that he congratulated her for having a constitutional monarchy. Now, we'll be aware that most of the powerful kings and queens of that time were absolute monarchs. So what the position of Queen Victoria as head of a constitutional monarchy was quite special at the time. Karen?
We have also heard that thou hast entrusted the reins of counsel into the hands of the representatives of the people. Thou indeed hast done well, for thereby the foundations of the edifice of thine affairs will be strengthened, and the hearts of all that are beneath thy shadow, whether high or low, will be tranquilized.
Right. Now, the interesting thing is that he then addresses the members of Parliament in Westminster and gives them advice.
It behoveth them, however, to be trustworthy among his servants, and to regard themselves as the representatives of all that dwell on earth. This is what counselleth them in this tablet, he who is the ruler, the all-wise.
Right, I would suggest that this is extremely relevant today, because for members of Parliament, whether in the UK or in other countries, to regard themselves as representatives of all that dwell on earth, rather than just pushing to look after their own corner, is quite a challenge. And we're not there yet. Yeah, I mean, he's really sort of suggesting that they should consider themselves as world citizens, rather than just responsible for their part of the world. And it becomes even more interesting, I think, because he revealed a prayer for the members of the British members of Parliament to say before they went to discuss in the Parliament. So could you continue, Karen?
If one of them directeth himself towards the assembly, let him turn his eyes unto the supreme horizon and say, O my God, I ask thee by thy most glorious name to aid me in that which will cause the affairs of thy servants to prosper and thy cities to flourish. Thou indeed hast power over all things. Blessed is he that entereth the assembly for the sake of God, and judgeth between men with pure justice. He indeed is of the blissful.
Right. So, I don't know how many members of Parliament have tried saying this prayer before they go to discuss things, but there it is. I think it's quite unique in religious history that he's given them a prayer. Now he addresses the elected representatives of the people in every land. So although it's a letter to Queen Victoria, he sort of branches off and starts to say things concerning all the countries in the world.
O ye the elected representatives of the people in every land, take ye counsel together, and let your concern be only for that which profiteth mankind, and bettereth the condition thereof, if ye be of them that scan heedfully. Scan heedfully.
Yes. So I think we can begin to see that there are things in this letter that could be extremely relevant to the people who are gathering in Glasgow next week, whenever it is. let your concern be only for that which profiteth mankind and bettereth the condition thereof. So again, just as he'd said to the members of parliament in the UK to consider what was good for the whole of mankind, he's reiterating this in the context of the elected representatives anywhere in the world.
Regard the world as the human body which, though it's at its creation whole and perfect, hath been afflicted through various causes with grave disorders and maladies. Not for one day did it gain ease, nay, its sickness waxed more severe, as it fell under the treatment of ignorant physicians, who gave full rein to their personal desires and have erred grievously. And if at one time, through the care of an able physician, a member of that body was healed, the rest remained afflicted as before. Thus informeth you the all-knowing, the all-wise.
Right, so still thinking of this prisoner writing to the Queen. Who are these ignorant physicians? I think it's fairly obvious. So, yeah, that's the sort of word of warning, I suppose.
We behold it in this day at the mercy of rulers so drunk with pride that they cannot discern clearly their own best advantage, much less recognise a revelation so bewildering and challenging as this. And whenever any one of them hath striven to improve its condition, his motive has been his own gain, whether confessedly so or not, and the unworthiness of this motive has limited his power to heal or cure.
Right. So we'll move on. Yes, then he talks about the remedy for mankind.
That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its people in one universal cause, one common faith. This can in no wise be achieved except through the power of a skilled and all-powerful and inspired physician. This verily is the truth, and all else naught but error. Each time that most mighty instrument hath come, and that light shone forth from the ancient dayspring, he was withheld by ignorant physicians who, even as clouds, interposed themselves between him and the world.
Right. Yes, this last paragraph, this most mighty instrument, he seems to be regarding the divine revelations that the various founders of the great religions have brought as not just being personal, but actually being a mighty instrument for transforming society. And we know that most of the great civilizations that exist, that have existed, that these revelations were very much at the heart of most of them, if not all. Right. So by implication, this prisoner in Akka seems to be saying that he actually is the skilled and all-powerful and inspired physician. And that, he's come to provide the remedy. Now, if we go back to the first part of this, that which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause. one common faith. Now, if we leave the one common faith aside for a moment, the union of all its peoples in one universal cause. And it struck me that surely the greatest gathering historically so far of world leaders in Glasgow next week, given the nature of the crisis that has brought them all together, which is the future of our planet, in fact, surely that by implication is one universal cause. It's something that every country should be agreed that it's absolutely vital to solve the problems that we're facing. So to me, that seems to be now, very relevant. One common faith, that's a bit more challenging, I think, and not very fashionable to think of such a thing. But I mean, we know that Baha'u'llah said that all the major religions of the world come from the same God and are part of an overall plan for humanity at different stages in its growth and so on. So you can think of it in that context anyway. Please interrupt if you think you have a question or a comment to make, although we'll have time, hopefully, at the end. Then he talks about world unity.
Consider these days in which he who is the ancient beauty, Baha'u'llah, hath come in the most great name, that he may quicken the world and unite its peoples.
Right. Sort of quickening the world is sort of bringing new life, and presumably of a spiritual nature, and unite its peoples. So this was a very fascinating vision that he was bringing. But I mean, he was basically saying this is the challenge for mankind in this age, is to unite its peoples. And then he goes on to talk about world peace.
O ye rulers of the earth, wherefore have ye clouded the radiance of the sun and caused it to cease from shining? Hearken unto the counsel given you by the pen of the Most High, that haply both ye and the poor may attain unto tranquillity and peace. We beseech God to assist the kings of the earth to establish peace on earth. He verily doth what he willeth.
Right. Yeah. So peace, that's something that should be a major challenge to us all as well. We're all, unless we're completely insensitive, we're all troubled by the things that we see on the television about things that are going on in different parts of the world, and the warlike attitudes of many people and leaders. And then, he really comes to some strong warnings to the kings of the earth at that time, remembering that of all those dynasties that he was addressing, they've all disappeared except for Queen Victoria's, which is, and Queen Victoria was the one that he congratulated for certain things. So it is rather interesting.
O kings of the earth, we see you increasing every year your expenditures, and laying the burden thereof on your subjects. This verily is wholly and grossly unjust. Fear the sighs and tears of this wronged one, and lay not excessive burdens on your peoples. Do not rob them to rear palaces for yourselves, nay, rather choose for them that which ye choose for yourselves. Thus we unfold to your eyes that which profiteth you, if ye but perceive. Your people are your treasures. Beware lest your rule violate the commandments of God, and ye deliver your wards to the hands of the robber. By them ye rule, by their means ye subsist, by their aid ye conquer. Yet how disdainfully ye look upon them. How strange, how very strange.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's wonderful. Your people are your treasures. Yeah. And really this reference, the hands of the robber, when we think of so many reports of corruption throughout the world, this is exactly what they are. They're robbers in those cases. Happily, not everybody's like that, but I mean, there are too many who are. Now, he then goes on to say, now that you've refused the most great peace, hold ye fast unto this, the lesser peace, that haply you may in some degree better your own condition and that of your dependents. Now, whether she would have known what he was talking about here, I'm not quite clear. Because while still, I believe while he was still in Baghdad, but it may have been when he got to Adrianople, but he said that the world could have had what he calls the most great peace in his lifetime, but they weren't ready to even hear about it. And so that in these letters, he offers them what he calls the lesser peace, which is things that they can do which will better things in the world to a degree. So it's a staging post, it's not the goal. And the lesser peace includes what we're just coming to, this collective security idea, which again was quite revolutionary. And we're still struggling with it today. So could you read that, Carolyn?
O rulers of the earth, be reconciled among yourselves, that you may need no more armaments, save in a measure to safeguard your territories and dominions. Beware lest you disregard the counsel of the all-knowing, the faithful. Be united, O kings of the earth, for thereby will the tempest of discord be stilled amongst you, and your peoples find rest, if ye be of them that comprehend. Should any one among you take up arms against another, rise ye all against him, for this is naught but manifest justice.
So, really, following the First World War, we had the League of Nations, which was the first attempt to bring countries together to keep the peace. But it was far from perfect, so it didn't achieve, in that respect, what it was aiming for. And then after the Second World War, we got the beginnings of the United Nations, which has been more successful than the League of Nations and has done a lot of good things, but it has not managed to establish peace in the world yet. And it's questionable without reform whether it is capable of doing so. Right. Then refugees. Of course, Baha'u'llah himself was in a sense a refugee. But but and those who went with him. But it's very topical, isn't it? Could you read that one, Caroline?
Should anyone seek refuge with you, extend unto him your protection and betray him not. Thus doth the pen of the Most High counsel you, as bidden by him who is the all-knowing, the all-informed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Jeremy, I'm just watching the time.
Yes, my love. Good. I won't say anything more about it then. Right. Be hopeful of the mercy of the Lord of creation, whose grace is infinite and the sea of whose gift is boundless. Then this is another warning. Chaos and confusion are daily increasing in the world. They will attain such intensity as to render the frame of mankind unable to bear them. Then will men be awakened and become aware that religion is the impregnable stronghold and manifest light of the world, and its laws, exhortations, and teachings the source of life on earth. So even today, that's quite challenging, isn't it? Then he goes on, Carolyn.
Let us pray to God that the breath of the Holy Spirit may again give hope and refreshment to the people, awakening in them a desire to do the will of God. May heart and soul be vivified in every man, so they all rejoice in a new birth. Then shall humanity put on a new garment in the radiance of the love of God, and it shall be the dawn of a new creation. Then will the mercy of the most merciful be showered upon all mankind, and they will arise to a new life. So that's Abdu'l-Baha.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is showing that there is, despite all these things that we've seen, that there is hope, that these difficulties will in fact provoke mankind into applying solutions. So we'll see this next week if people are sufficiently provoked, which is far from certain, that they actually take the steps that are really needed, because everybody knows what's needed. It's just the will to do it and do it together that is, well, so far has not been lacking. Then he gives a prayer for the Queen to say, and we'll just have part of this, Carolyn, please.
O my sovereign Lord, I am but a vassal of thine, and thou art in truth the King of kings. I have lifted my suppliant hands unto the heaven of thy grace and thy bounties. Send down then upon me from the clouds of thy generosity that which will rid me of all save thee, and draw me nigh unto thyself. I beseech thee, O my Lord, by thy name, which thou hast made the King of names, and the manifestation of thyself to all who are in heaven and on earth, to rend asunder the veils that have intervened between me and my recognition of the dawning place of thy signs and the dayspring of thy revelation. Thou art verily the Almighty, the All-Powerful, the All-Bounteous. Deprive me not, O my Lord, of the fragrances of the robe of thy mercy in thy days, and write down for me that which thou hast written down for thy handmaidens who have believed in thee and in thy signs, and have recognized thee, and set their hearts towards the horizon of thy cause. Thou art truly the Lord of the worlds, and those of those who show mercy, the most merciful.
Now, when Queen Victoria received this letter, reportedly because we don't know a lot of details about this, her response was this statement: if this is of God, it will endure. If not, it can do no harm. Which is interesting because it's a quote from the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament. They were the words of Gamaliel, who was a chief priest. So given the lack of response or the arrogant response in certain cases of other kings and rulers to Baha'u'llah's letters, this was relatively positive. Now, if we associate Queen Victoria with her government, this relative positive response continued, both from her country and her progeny. Now, after Baha'u'llah's passing, Abdu'l-Baha, the son and successor of Baha'u'llah, received a British knighthood for his humanitarian efforts to feed the hungry in Palestine during the World War I. And here we see him at the ceremony where this is Lord Allenby, General Allenby, who came with troops to free Haifa from the Ottoman control. And it's really interesting because the British government gave instructions that when General Allenby arrived in Haifa, the first thing he must do is make sure that Abdu'l-Baha was safe. So that was, you know, another positive connection, rather extraordinary, really. Because he was still an exile and a prisoner of the Ottoman Empire until Lord Allenby arrived. Then, in 1926, one of Queen Victoria's granddaughters, Queen Marie of Romania, accepted Baha'u'llah's teachings and became the first Baha'i monarch in the world. So this is her during the First World War. She had sought training as a nurse, and here she was nursing the wounded during the First World War. And here she is as queen. Now, we finish with the words of Queen Marie of Romania, because she made some remarkable statements testifying to the importance of the Baha'i message. So, Carolyn?
A woman brought me the other day a book. I spell it with a capital letter because it is a glorious book of love and goodness, strength and beauty. She gave it to me because she had learned I was in grief and sadness and wanted to help. She put it into my hand saying, "You seem to live up to his teachings." And when I opened the book, I saw it was the word of Abdu'l-Baha, prophet of love and kindness, and of his father, the great teacher of international goodwill and understanding, of a religion which links all creeds. Their writings are a great cry towards peace, reaching beyond all limits of frontiers, above all dissension about rites and dogmas. It is a religion based on the inner spirit of God, upon the great, not to be overcome verity that God is love, meaning just that. It teaches that all hatreds, intrigues, suspicions, evil words, all aggressive patriotism even, are outside the one essential law of God, and that special beliefs are but surface things, whereas the heart that beats with divine love knows no tribe nor race. It is a one. It is a,
Sorry.
It is a wondrous message that Baha'u'llah and his son Abdu'l-Baha have given us. They have not set it up aggressively, knowing that the germ of eternal truth, which lies at its core, cannot but take root and spread. There is only one great verity in it, love, the mainspring of every energy, tolerance towards each other, desire of understanding each other, knowing each other, helping each other, forgiving each other. It is Christ's message taken up anew, in the same words almost, but adapted to the 1,000 years and more difference that lies between year one and today. No man could fail to be better because of this book. I commend it to you all. If ever the name of Baha'u'llah or Abdu'l-Baha comes to your attention, do not put their writings from you. Search out their books and let their glorious, peace-bringing, love-creating words and lessons sink into your hearts as they have into mine.
So as we can see, that was written when she was on a visit to Canada, and she gave further testimonies in 1934.
The Baha'i teaching brings peace to the soul and hope to the heart. To those in search of assurance, the words of the Father are as a fountain in the desert after long wandering. The Baha'i teachings bring peace and understanding. It's like a wide embrace, gathering together all those who have long searched for words of hope. It accepts all great prophets gone before. It destroys no other creeds and leaves all doors open. Saddened by the continual strife among believers of many confessions and wearied of their intolerance towards each other, I discovered in the Baha'i teaching the real spirit of Christ, so often denied and misunderstood. Unity instead of strife, hope instead of condemnation, love instead of hate, and a great reassurance for all men.
So, open for discussion.